All right, we're going to talk about freedom of speech. We've just come off the topic of marriage, but even just when we were waiting for the camera rollover and things like that, we got back onto marriage talking about freedom of speech. So Peter Van Onselen expressed some opinions, and frequently does, that it is despicable, unconscionable, and should be illegal for a baker to be able to refuse to bake a cake for a gay wedding. He equates that, I think, somewhat fallaciously to refusing to bake a cake for a interracial marriage. Now, I'm actually going to put I think you'll agree with this, but feel free not to. If somebody wanted to refuse to bake a cake for an interracial wedding, I would say, let them refuse. Like, the guy's a jerk. I don't want to go to that bakery because he refuses to bake a cake for an interracial wedding. I think he is a racist. I think he does have really, really backward ideas. The best thing you could probably say about him is he's ignorant. But I don't think government has a right to compel him to bake a cake.
Yeah, and clearly not. I mean, if I own a shop, that's my property, and if someone wants to come in and buy some of my property, using their property, their money, we can freely exchange to do that, or we won't. Often we don't freely exchange because the price is too high or there's some other reason. But it may be I just don't like the person. You know what? You're carrying on like a pork chop, out of my shop. I don't want to sell you anything. Just get out. Or there may be other reasons.
Yeah.
Now, Peter Van whatever his name is, PVO. Yep. He's out there, right? He thinks that his opinion's so important that he's going to force us to engage in a transaction. You know what that is? He's trying to make us his slave.
Absolutely.
He's trying to force us to do something that we otherwise may not want to do. And that's now, he hasn't got the ability to do it himself. So what's he going to do? He's going to run off to the government. He's going to encourage legislative change. He's going to use his position in the media to campaign for this with all his mates. And he's going to want change. He's going to shut down a little bit of more freedom that existed in society prior to him rabbiting on. And that, to me, that's the thin edge of the wedge that you were talking about before. They're different issues, in my opinion, but you know, same-sex marriage and that issue are different issues.
Well, it will result, and this is why we must vote no to redefining marriage, is because it will lead to, certainly, not conspiracy theory, absolutely proven precedents around the world where these jurisdictions have experimented with this change. It will lead to an erosion of freedom. It will lead to photographers and bakers and candlestick makers being told they have to participate in the celebration of things that they don't want to. They have to supply. It will create a protected class of people, and it leads to erosion of freedom. It's certainly not just about the claimed rights of making marriage a broader definition.
Yep. I haven't told you what I'm going to vote. I'm not sure I'm going to.
Okay. You don't have to.
What I'm interested in is...
Yes, you do. This is a political show.
What I'm interested in is exploring the philosophy and the reasons behind some of the things that are going on in society at the moment.
Yeah.
You know, there's a certain strata of society that feel that they know what's best for the rest.
Yeah.
And they'll use their position, which is often granted to them by government in the first place.
Yeah.
And they'll use their position in order to, you know, tell the plebs how to lead their lives.
Look, we want to talk about freedom of speech, and my assertion is that the freedom to say no to participating in a wedding that you have a moral conviction you don't want to will be removed. Now, the evidence of this isn't conspiracy theory, the evidence of this is that neither of the major parties are even contemplating the idea of freedom for photographers or bakers. There's not even a question. When they talk about protecting freedom of religion, they're only talking about ministers and churches.
Yep.
And in fact, the Labor Party won't even extend that freedom of religion to not participate to a church hall.
Yep.
If your church hall is available for hire for weddings, you cannot say no to any wedding under proposed Labor legislation. You know, the coalition is barely any better by drawing a line there.
Yep.
But there's no consideration at all. They're not even contemplating freedom for private individuals to refuse to participate.
Yeah, and look, so the same-sex marriage legislation is a bit of a sort of a lightning rod for all these issues, but this has been going on for some time. The Human Rights Commission, with its 18C legislation, has specific carve-outs for journalists. Why journalists? Why can journalists make comments that otherwise would be considered offensive or discriminatory? Why do they get a specific? Because you know why? Because they're a danger to the government in power, so they get a special carve-out. The rest of us plebs, we're at the mercy of the coercive influence of the HRC.
And Lee, what's a journalist? Surely everybody who has an opinion on Facebook is now a blogger, is now a journalist.
Yeah.
What an arbitrary line to draw in this.
It is an arbitrary line. Suddenly we're not a society made up of individuals and people. We're made up of different categories of people.
Tribes.
And we have different rules and laws that apply to different categories of people. And it's a crazy system, and it's only going to get worse. And the same-sex marriage legislation, I understand there are many people fearful that this is the thin edge of the wedge. You know what? It's not. It's the same-sex marriage legislation is in the thick part of the wedge. The thin edge has already been jammed in there a long time ago.
That's right. All these discrimination tribunals, anti-discrimination, well, no, they are discrimination tribunals.
Yep.
They are very definitely discriminating between different classes of people who some are more equal than others, to borrow a phrase.
So, I see that the actual legislation around same-sex marriage is a little bit different to those, I guess, those left-leaning cultural Marxist type sort of pieces of legislation that are very coercive. So that's me. I see them as different.
Yep.
I can understand how people see that they're bundled up and one leads to the other. I'm not necessarily convinced that is the case.
Really?
No, I think demarcation can be clearly drawn, particularly from a philosophical point of view. Where I struggle with this whole argument of the thin edge of the wedge is that we're saying, or people are saying, that our freedoms are going to be reduced down the track, and the only way we can stop that is to contain certain freedoms now. So the Marriage Act, or the amendments to the Marriage Act, don't do anything other than open it up and extend some freedoms. Now, we can agree or disagree. People can agree or disagree whether they should be extended or not, but at the end of the day, it's extending a freedom. And I have a trouble with people who want to argue that we shouldn't extend the freedom because later on we're going to have freedoms taken away. You can't if you're advocating for more freedom, then I think consistently you've got to say, well, I can see this as more freedom. However, but you're very clear. You can't sort of just say, well, one's going to necessarily lead to the other. I think you've just got to say, you know what, that is more freedom, but it's too big a risk.
I'm going to respond with two things. The first one, and I'm just going to put this out there, is calling the redefinition of something that is self-evident is not a freedom. The freedom to redefine gravity is not a freedom. That's an imagination, and whether we popularly agree on the redefinition of gravity or not, it's actually materially unaffected by our agreement. But it's not an exaggeration of imagination to claim that we have to watch out for the erosion of freedoms in the wake of an increase in freedoms, because it's demonstrated over and over and over again in Canada, in America, in England, in Sweden, in all of these places, you do see these erosions.
So I agree. Yeah,
but
in that situation.
But the serious point is, the government is asking us to trust them. They're saying, let's decide to change things, and we'll decide how it looks like after we've changed it. And I just don't trust government that much.
Hence, I'm a repealist. Get rid of the Marriage Act. But this is where I think we differ on the margins. Where government influence is involved, we should seek to have it as free as possible, notwithstanding that then could be used to be more restrictive down the track. But there are separate issues, and I think they need to be argued as separate issues. And one of the reasons
I don't think you can separate it. I think you trusting the government and giving them a blank check with our freedom in the name of freedom.
Well, whether the Same-Sex Marriage Act gets up or not, all these other things are coming in any case. They're coming. You know, if you successfully get the No campaign up, it's not going to stop safe schools. It's not going to stop the indoctrination of. It's not going to stop the national curriculum being further adapted to have left-leaning agendas pushed down onto our kids.
In and of itself, no. But it's kind of like saying, if we win this battle, the war's not going to be finished, so we might as well concede it.
Yeah, we can go on, like, I understand and I can see it, right? I just think for consistency purposes, you either argue for more freedom or you don't. Now, I come from a space where I think legislation is very restrictive, all sorts of legislation. I'd much prefer to see most legislation repealed. You know, just take out the last 40 years of legislation, probably society would be a better place. You know, all legislation. And this one, I can't repeal it, but if it's going to be opened up just a smidge, you know where I'm leaning. I don't like it. I'd have much better solutions. I'm really concerned about what comes after it, but for consistency purposes, I feel that's the way I've got to lean.
Awesome. So, well, it's certainly a valid point of view and certainly well argued. I've been talking with Andrew Cooper from LibertyWorks. We have run out of time, but I look forward to definitely having another stimulating conversation with you again, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Thanks, David. Pleasure to be on.
If you'd like to support the next episode of Church and State, jump on the website churchandstate.com.au and follow the links in the menus to donate or become a partner once off, or even just a little bit every month will help us a lot. And also head over to libertyworks.com.au.
.org.au.
libertyworks.org.au. We'll also put the links underneath the video so you can click on that. Lots of great reading articles there from some very good writers. Also look out for the events that are coming up. There's a great conference coming up at the end of the year with people from all over the political spectrum. I don't think there are any Greens.
No, not yet. Okay. There might be.
They're not huge into liberty. So we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. If you really enjoyed that video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Have a look at this great video next, and check out the website for even more interesting articles and episodes later.